Started. Thank you all so much for joining us for the 2024 Winter Webinar Series, hosted by the Stockbridge-Muncie Community's Historic Preservation Office, located in the Homelands in Williamstown, Massachusetts. My name is Sarah Regensberger. I am the Program Coordinator here in the Historic Preservation Office. This call is being recorded and will later be made available as a public recording on the Stockbridge-Muncie website. We will end the recording after the presentation ends and before the question and answer portion will begin so that we can provide this recording as an educational tool, as well as protect the privacy of those who wish to ask their questions themselves. For those who would like to use this video, rewatch it, or share it with friends, a copy will be made available on the landing page currently linked on the Historic Preservation website, as well as on the Stockbridge-Muncie Cultural Affairs YouTube channel. I want to point out a few features of our Zoom call today. For those of you joining us via computer, if you hover your cursor near the bottom of the screen, a toolbar will appear. Click on the Q&A icon to ask questions that arise during the presentation, which we will address afterwards. If you would like to ask your own question, please click the raise hand icon after the presentation is finished, and we will get to you after answering all questions in the Q&A box. Everyone was muted upon entering the call and will remain muted until the Q&A portion of the webinar. Today, we are being joined by Dr. Jeffrey Bendremer, the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Stockbridge-Muncie community. The Underrepresented Communities Grant offered by the National Park Service are intended to aid in diversifying the nominations submitted to the National Register of Historic Places. Projects include surveys and inventories of historic properties that are associated with communities currently underrepresented in the National Register, as well as the development of nominations for specific sites. The Mohican people have held on to the importance of Papscanee Island through their many removals and through to today. The Open Space Institute operated a nature preserve on the land beginning in the 1990s and worked with the Stockbridge-Muncie community in 2021 to return this portion of Papscanee Island to the tribe's ownership. In association with this return, the Tribal Historic Preservation Office decided to apply for an Underrepresented Communities Grant to the National Register of Historic Places to better safeguard the land as well as more formally recognize the significance of Mohican history on the island. This was a long-standing goal of the Tribal Historic Preservation, and we're so pleased to share this work with you today. Now, Jeff, if you could please take it away.
Thank you very much, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here today, and so I see a lot of familiar names amongst the attendees. Welcome, and it's a real pleasure to talk about this topic because when I first came aboard, which is pretty close to 2 years ago, this project to nominate Papscanee Island as a historic district to the National Register of Historic Places was a project that was already in the works. It was already Bonnie Hartley was very involved, as was Sherry White, both of whom are on the Zoom today. And so I sort of joined in mid-course. The Underrepresented Communities Grant had been obtained, and they were working very hard in this when I came around, and so I joined in, and I guess what do you call it? I'll go right to ruining it for you at the end. About 6 weeks ago, a little over 6 weeks ago, the National Park Service found the Papscanee Island Historic District as eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. So that's the cutting right to the end. And so we're very pleased that this was a successful effort over a period of roughly 3 years. A lot of people, different people contributed to it. And we're just really happy. By the way, the district is also on the New York Register of Historic Places. It was also approved for that as well. And so I'll tell you a little bit about how we went about creating our nomination, and a little bit about the history of Papscanee Island. I'm going to quickly share my screen. perhaps you can verify whether you are seeing my
Yep,
my
your
slide.
screen is there.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Um, I do plan on getting you dizzy with a little bit of zooming because some of the details in maps and other are difficult to see, but hopefully we'll be able to give you a closer view of certain things. So Papscanee Island is, you can find it, just look for the Papscanee Island Nature Preserve. This is a Google Maps view of it on the right. And you can take a lovely walk in one of the last undeveloped and wild places in this part of the middle Hudson Valley. It's absolutely beautiful. As you can see, it is owned by the Stockbridge-Muncie community and managed by Rensselaer County. One of the interesting things when I first became familiar with the project is I looked at this on the map and I said to myself, is that an island? It says Papscanee Island. It really doesn't look like an island. And so when I came aboard, I had to say to myself, well, what exactly is it that we're nominating? This historic landform is, well, let us say, obscured today. So we really need to do a little bit of work on that. So, but that aside for a moment, this is the trailhead at the nature preserve. As I said, it's quite beautiful. Uh, this is the when you enter, you can read a little bit about the nature preserve, read a little bit about the Stockbridge-Muncie community, and I wanted to situate you a little bit in the Stockbridge Muncie homeland. And so really we're talking about a very, very large area between the Muncie, who are the sort of northern division of the Delaware or Lenape, and the Mohicans, who are further north up into this area. The Papscanee Island is located right about here. Hopefully you can see my cursor. And you can see, so as far as the Mohican homeland, it's very centrally located. We really have, we cover the Tribal Historic Preservation Office here covers 73 counties in 8 states, as you can see here. By the way, this map is available, a link to this map is available on the Stockbridge-Muncie website. So there's to get you a little situated. One of the really important things about Papscanee Island in terms of the nomination is it was extremely unusual, I think, because there was a whole ethnographic part to it, and that is, why is this place important to contemporary Stockbridge-Muncie citizens? And I think that this was one of the things that really distinguished our nomination, perhaps from many of the ones that they get at the National Park Service. And so we actually had responses, I think it was 29 responses. Why is the homeland important? And I'm not going to read these, but these are the quotes from Stockbridge-Muncie citizens. Why is the homeland important? And then why is Papscanee Island specifically important? And this was very important to us to center the Stockbridge-Muncie community in the discussion of importance and relevance for the nomination, and to center this perspective. And that's also why I want to put this front and center in my presentation, because this was a place that was protected by generations of Stockbridge Munsee against development and other kinds of impacts. So for years and years and years, this place, Papscanee Island, was acknowledged as being important by the tribe and its ancestors for generations, and that is a central. It's central to our nomination. It is also central to the purpose of the grant that we received, the Underrepresented Communities Grant, because many communities are excluded from this process, or the process is made extremely difficult because the communities are marginalized. And this grant that we received was specifically addressed this. And as I'll mention later, we ran across a very pretty staunch opposition to our nominating Papscanee Island as a part of this process for just that reason, just the very reason that the grant exists. Well, going back in history, so we were saying, well, it doesn't look like an island, but we do know that very, very early on, Papscanee Island was actually an island, and that it was situated in an extremely important location. This is I don't know if you can make it out here, but this says Castle Island in Dutch. Castle Island. This island right here is called Westerlo Island. It's also the mouth of the Normanskill River where it meets the Hudson. This is the Hudson River here. And here's Papscanee Island. And literally the Fort Nassau was, they say, it's thought that it was on Castle Island. That's the reason it has that name in the 16 teens. And look where it's located, literally right across from the northern end of Papscanee Island. And I'll be referring to Westerlo Island or Castle Island and Papscanee again. By the way, when Fort Nassau was abandoned, I think it was in 1618, they moved a little bit upriver and founded Fort Orange, and this becomes Albany, New York. This is actually the earliest map that we have. It said 1632, and here is Papscanee Island. Here's Kuiper Island. It's called Godden's Island. Pixaway, Westerlo again. This is Castle Island where Fort Nassau was located. So this is one of the earlier maps that we have, which shows Papscanee Island. And here's 1662. What's really interesting about this is a map of the entire, well, New England, New York, New Jersey. This is a very, very wide map. But this area, as you can see, there's a lot going on right in here. And this is basically, at this point, it's the manor of Rensselaerswyck. And this is, as you can see, Mohican country. It has a number of, it says Mohican Island, which may be Papscanee Island. I think this is actually Papscanee Island. This is probably Schodack Island, which is a little bit further to the south and is today a New York State Park. But this is probably Papscanee right here. And this is an interesting thing. It says De Audrey. This is an important, it's an important location. It's important enough to put on this map. And that is actually the old, what they call, and here's another view from, they made 1 million versions of this map, but they all have very similar, here's Mohican's Island. and de Audry. This is an important it's an important geographical feature or physiographic feature that made this area extremely important. And of course, here's Fort Orange or Albany to the north. And here's a map which is from 1733. It's a little bit later. It's the map of the British Empire in North America from 1733. And of course, it takes even a larger area into account. In fact, all the way out to what they used to call the Northwest Territories over here. And if you zoom in, you can see it says Papscanee Island right here. So and then this is a much later map, 1881. And this was a great map because it's a nautical chart. And so the accuracy of this is of a more modern standard. And you can definitely see Papscanee Island in its entirety, as well as Kuiper Island, which has sort of become silted in over here, kind of attached to Papscanee Island. But this shape with this little, I call it like a little glove shape, like a mitten shape, you see on many maps where you can see this sort of Kuiper Island just off to the side. We needed to know exactly where this was situated on a sort of against the modern physiography of the area. And by the way, here's Westerlo Island, again, where we think Fort Nassau was, the various islands. What we know, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, what we know about Mohican settlement is that the islands were extremely important. Mohican people were occupying islands up and down the Hudson River in this area. I sometimes think of the Mohicans during this period of time as being an archipelago civilization, and that these islands were extremely important. But Papscanee Island, as it turns out, is particularly important during this period of early European contact. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So we're really trying to figure out how where Papscanee Island is. For example, this is a USGS topo map, and you can see Papscanee Creek, which once separated the island from the mainland, but it is just a remnant of what it once was. And so we took the 1881 Hudson River nautical chart, and we were able to overlay it. I don't know if you can see how we were able to make this map transparent, so you could see through to the USGS map below, and we could place it exactly where it would have been. And then we could trace it on the modern map. And this is what it looked like. Here's Westerlo Island just up here, Papscanee Island looking just like this. And you can see that there is a great deal of silting and also the deposition of dredge spoils that really has obscured the original banks of the Hudson River. And so one of the things that we noticed is that the Hudson River was much, much wider back in time. You can see that how much wider. And as it turns out, much shallower. And so when and I just wanted to show you, here's a satellite image of the original island and where it's situated. By the way, you can also see how well over 80% of the island is completely undeveloped. As you can see, there are a few at the very, very northern tip, and then this one development kind of isolated here in the center. And those are the only developments that have happened here. Whereas, as you can see on the other side of the river, it's much more developed. And we were also able to look at a LiDAR image and then again superimpose upon it what the original island would have looked like. And then, of course, we can overlay on top of that all of the property lines, the current properties as they exist. By the way, the green is the Stockbridge-Munsee owned Papscanee Island Nature Preserve. So these are the parcels that the tribe currently owns. As it turns out, all of the tribe's properties fall onto within the actual historic island. I mean, it's very easily could have purchased another property that went outside of that or included other areas. And so of the original 500 and something acres that are within the historic Papscanee Island and Kuiper Island, the tribe actually owns roughly about 1/3 of it with the nature preserve, as you can see. So now we know where we're talking about. So we need to, for our nomination, we need to know what kinds of cultural resources are we talking about. So there are a lot of known historic resources in this area. But we could only look at the ones that are actually inside of that historic landform. And there we have 22 known archaeological sites. And there are many, many more, though, I guess you could say on the mainland, that is in adjacent areas to the island. There's probably another dozen or more sites in very close proximity to Papscanee Island that relate to it but aren't on it. So just want to be clear about that. So 22 archaeological sites, but I think it makes more sense for us to talk about components. And components are one of those jargony things that archaeologists talk about, which is basically a part of an archaeological site that relates to a particular time period or a particular culture. And there can be at a single archaeological site, because archaeology sort of accumulates like a layer cake, there can be multiple components at a single site. So I think it behooves us to talk more about components. So if we're talking about pre-European contact Native American sites, that is sites that date from before AD 1600, there are 16 components. Post-contact Native American sites are 5. Late woodland sites that are sites that just predate European contact. And by the way, European contact right in this spot, we actually know exactly when it happens. It happens in 1609, and it happens when Henry Hudson sails his famous ship, the Half Moon, upriver, up the Hudson River, that is eventually to take his name. We know exactly when it happens. Late woodland sites, 12, and 1 middle woodland component as well. On the island as well are post-contact Euro-American sites, 11 components, 1 standing domestic structure, and 1 historic cemetery. So those are all within the historic landform as we were able to do that that environmental reconstruction and understand how the original Papscanee Island was situated. And of course, down here are the 4 criterion for a successful National Register nomination. criterion A, B, C, and D. We're going to talk about this. As we began to work on this project, it expanded because the importance of this place is, once you get into it, it's truly manifest. And so we wrote a nomination for under all four criteria, and that's the nomination that was approved. So as I understand it, it's pretty rare for a nomination to go forward uh, through approval under all four, because any one of these you could have had a successful nomination. We were successful under all four criteria, and I'd like to talk about them each individually. So first of all is criterion D. I'm going to start with D because this is the one that usually I'm an archaeologist by training, and this is the one that archaeology usually falls under. So the property has yielded or may likely to yield information about prehistory or history. And of course, we know with all of those archaeological sites that we know existed on the island, that this is going to be a major um, uh, 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 area. I would say roughly 20% of the nomination specifically addresses this. This is the much more, I guess you could say, down in the weeds type of analysis. And really, what I chose to look at very closely was settlement and subsistence on the island. Why was this place settled so heavily? Why are there so many late woodland sites? A dozen late woodland sites on Papscanee Island. And the reason is that, first of all, it's amazing agricultural land. And before European contact, and again, this is let's just call this a hypothesis. I did my dissertation research in the Connecticut River Valley and the settlement system on the late woodland. And the settlement system there was what I called tethered mobility. So you have groups of people who sort of, they're mobile seasonally, but they're tethered to the agricultural lands that they tend during the spring through the fall. And then they oftentimes will relocate to more upland locations for the winter time, and then recongregate down at I call them agricultural hamlets, and where the stored agricultural products could be in subterranean storage pits. And after the flooding is finished, after the spring flooding is finished, and the soil is replenished with the spring floods. And this is a perfect place. Papscanee Island is the perfect place to look at that settlement system and subsistence system, and then to go on to say, well, how did this change with the advent of Europeans in the area? And what I found in the Connecticut River, and I think is likely to have happened here in the Middle Hudson River, is that the settlement system was changed, was altered and disrupted because suddenly the river became the theater for which trade opportunities with Europeans became important. And so the settlement system became progressively less mobile and more oriented towards the river, towards trade, with the fur trade becoming extremely important. And so there is the reason why we have 5 components for the post-European contact period on Papscanee Island. This became an important place for trade, and that relates to criterion for Papscanee Island. relates to criterion A and B. And so here is criterion A: property is associated with historic events or activities. And as I mentioned, Henry Hudson sailed up the Hudson, the river that was to take his name. And I'm showing, by the way, I'm showing these images not because they're accurate in any sense, but to show you um, the the place that Henry Hudson occupies in the minds of historians, in this case, in the minds of artists, and in the sort of Eurocentric perception of history. These images, there's tons of images of the half. Oh, and by the way, at the very top is an actual replica of the half moon. That's an actual ship. That's not a painting or a drawing. That's an actual reproduction of Henry Hudson's ship. So the importance of the historic event, which is, or activity, is the arrival of Henry Hudson in 1609 and coming up the Hudson River and getting as far as Papscanee Island, because at Papscanee Island the river widened and it became extremely shallow. And so we think that somewhere, either Papscanee Island, some people differ, maybe a little bit north of Papscanee Island, was the furthest the half moon could actually traverse the river. And Henry Hudson did send a smaller boat. You can probably see kind of something like this, did send a smaller craft further upriver, but this was as far up the river as the half moon could make it. And so, in a sense, this sets the scene for the Papscanee Island becoming just a very, very important place for Euro-American and Native American interaction, trade, diplomacy, and even warfare, and those kinds of dynamics. So criterion B is property is associated with important persons. And I haven't mentioned this yet, but it's extremely important. Papscanee Island is named after a Mohican leader. And forgive me, I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but a Sachem Papscanee. So Henry Hudson got his river, but Sachem Papscanee got his island in terms of being named right after him. And we came to the conclusion, based on many of the documents that bear Sachem Papscanee's signature, we'll say signature mark, who was part of was a party to some of the earliest land transactions between native people and certainly the Dutch. And Fort Nassau, by the way, is said to be the first Dutch settlement in North America. And by the way, going back to the archaeological sites, the Dutch archaeological sites on Papscanee Island are also said to be the earliest extant Dutch archaeological sites, domestic sites in New York State. And so again, the confluence of the event of the Europeans, well, going back, the importance of Papscanee Island as a locus and of Native American, and a surviving locus of Native American domestic activity in the pre-European contact period, the changes that are documented there by the archaeological sites with the advent of the Europeans, with the actual appearance of Henry Hudson there and having to stop there because that's the farthest upriver that he could go, and the important person that he made a relationship with, all together sort of emphasize the importance of this place during that early period. I wanted to read very quickly, if I could. Just please bear with me 1 second. Did you lose my slides?
I'm still seeing them. I think we should be okay.
Okay. Because I'm just putting something else. This is actually an account from one of Hudson's crew members, Robert Jewett, which he wrote. And this is recalling Henry Hudson's voyage upriver. And you have to realize that he had some very rough encounters with native people further downriver, violent encounters. So he was not necessarily getting a warm. You're not necessarily getting a warm reception. So this is the account. I sailed to the shore in one of the canoes with an old man who was the chief of a tribe consisting of 40 men and 17 women. These I saw there in a house well constructed of oak bark and circular in shape, so it had the appearance of being built with an arched roof. These are wigwams, as you know. It contained a great quantity of maize or Indian corn and beans of the last year's growth, which suggests storage of crops, besides what was growing in the fields. On our coming into the house, 2 mats were spread out to sit upon, and some food was immediately served in well-made red wooden bowls. 2 men were also dispatched at once with bows and arrows in a quest for game, and soon brought back a pair of pigeons. They supposed that I would remain with them for the night, but I returned after a short time on board the ship. The land is the finest for cultivation that I have ever in my life set foot upon, and it also abounds in trees of every description. These natives are a very good people, for when they saw that I would not remain, they supposed that I was afraid of their bows, and taking their arrows, they broke them into pieces and threw them into the fire. So I think that is a fascinating account of the experience that Henry Hudson and his crew had when he got to this area. I'm not saying that the old man, the leader there, was Papscanee, but what I would say and what we say in the nomination is that that Henry Hudson and the Dutch were able to establish a very close and workable relationship at this place, whereas he was not having the same kind of reception in other places. And that is the explanation for why the people involved are important, the place and events are so important, and why that that Sachem Papscanee, whose leadership in this area was, from the documents you can tell, was pretty important, that that he established a rapport with the Dutch, a diplomatic, economic, and political relationship established in this place during this period of time that actually endured for generations. And that was the argument that we used in our successful nomination. One of the reasons why I think this occurred is where Papscanee Island I mean, it occurred because of Sachem Papscanee and his political acumen and diplomatic acumen, I should say, and that this is what he thought was advantageous for his people. But the physiography of the place is very, very interesting. So in this map from 1776, you can see Skodak Island to the south. You can see this is called the Overslough. This is that it actually got a name, the shall, and you can see it actually right here. It says Overslag, it's sometimes called. This is the shallows beyond which you had to wait till the tide came in order to. This was where the half moon was where the northern extent, or perhaps a little bit above this, the northern extent of where the ship could actually go. And so you had this de Audry, the old anchorage, down here below. This is actually where Dutch maritime vessels would have to wait. It's an anchorage to wait for the tide to get to a certain point where they could continue north. And so and Papscanee Island is right there. By the way, you can see that funny shape of it. That's Kuiper Island is kind of sticking out, even though it's attached by this point in time. It's there. So if you have to wait, if you're in a ship and you're on a river and you have to go up north and then stop, this is the perfect opportunity for trade. And this is why I think Papscanee Island this area became so important, and that Sachem Papscanee became the leader who happened to be at the place where the Dutch were accessible during this period of time of early European native interaction and the changing of settlement and subsistence systems to take advantage of European trade and the beginnings of the fur trade in itself, that this became an area of focus. And of course, right after that, during that early period, you get the Fort Nassau. I think that this is Westerlo Island. This is the Norman Skill. I think we can see it's Norman Skill here, and eventually Fort Orange and Albany a little bit further north from there. But it's this confluence of the right people in the right place, in the right sort of physiographic, geographic position to take advantage of this of these new opportunities. And all of this happens right there in that spot. I'll just quickly go over criterion C. There is one standing early Dutch stone house on the island, and it, as you can see, here's the older part of the house, and it also has a historic cemetery. The earliest marked grave in the cemetery is 1707, which is pretty early for a carved stone monument. And so I just wanted to again show you with the physiography. Here's the LiDAR map. Here's the Overslough is up here in this area. The old anchorage is down in this area, and of course Papscanee Island is right here as well. It's funny, there's one sort of standout geographical feature on Papscanee Island, and the Dutch called it the Hogeberg, or the high hill, and my Mohican is non-existent, Patquatic, which, if you can believe at least the one translation, means big turnip in Mohican. If that again, it's a source, but I'm not sure how accurate. Here are our milestones. We submitted our final version of the nomination to the New York State Division of Historic Preservation. The Historic Preservation Board discussed Papscanee Island nomination, but we were tabled. That was June 8th last year. Why were we tabled? We were tabled because there was an organized resistance amongst the landowners out at Papscanee Island. And they convinced it ended up that the review board tabled the vote in June to allow allow some more communication with the homeowners. We had a September 7th meeting that was canceled due to the lack of a quorum. We finally got in there on December 4th, and the State Historic Review Board voted unanimously, despite the landowners' objections, to approve. Just days later, it became a official historic district in the New York Register of Historic Places. It was sent down to the National Park Service. It was published in the National Register for comment. It came out of that comment period, and it went before the panel down there at the National Park Service. And in January 26th, we got official notification of the finding, the approval and eligibility of the historic district. That being said, the district is not listed on the National Register of Historic Places, even though it was found eligible, even after the New York State the State Historic Preservation Office organized informational sessions for the landowners. Even more landowners objected. And so when over 50% of landowners do not agree, the nomination cannot be sent to the keeper and cannot be listed on the National Register. So we do have a successful finding of eligibility and approval from the National Park Service, but we do not have an actual listing on the National Register. As we see it, the eligibility is the most important part. Somewhere down the line, the landowners may relent and it can be listed, but we have what we think is extremely strong nomination and an extremely important historical district. But the reason that this all came out of the underrepresented community grant is exactly the reason why communities such as tribal nations and the Stockbridge-Munsee in particular, why they don't get more things listed on the National Register. This project all came out of an underrepresented community grant, and it was successful to the degree it could be, given the opposition, the organized opposition that we encountered. Thank you very much. I hate to end on a negative note. And I'll just end by saying it is an incredible place with an incredible story. And the fact that the Stockbridge-Munsee community has protected this place to the degree and with the success that it has done is really quite extraordinary.